Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is One Punch Man, Season 2, Episode 20, The Resistance of the Strong. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So this episode starts with the award ceremony of the martial arts tournament. Saitama's already run off, so Suryu, because Saitama was disqualified despite losing the fight, is the winner of the tournament officially and is receiving his check and trophy. When Gokutetsu finally makes it to the site of the tournament and he breaks in, obviously all of the civilians watching flee while the martial artists are kind of left behind on stage, surrounded by three crows and Gokutetsu, who basically drops a bunch of monster cells in front of them and says, "You're going to join the Monster Association and become monsters, or we're going to kill you here." Some of the less successful opponents kind of stand to the side, not willing to move. A couple of the more confident ones do take the monster cells right away, and Suryu ends up defeating those monsters, leading to him then having to fight against the crows and Gokutetsu. While he's fighting, he does a lot of his moves, but ultimately he does end up being no match for Gokutetsu, and he ends up severely wounded. Briefly, Snek and Max come back in their hero outfits, and they are able to put up a bit more of a fight than when they were in civilian clothes, because their hero outfits are specially designed to help them fight. Unfortunately, they also do end up being defeated pretty quickly. We get a brief aside to Watchdog Man, where he has defeated the monsters that attacked him in the previous episode, so now Garo is after him, and he realizes that because he watched Watchdog Man's fight, he thought he understood how powerful and fast he was, but then upon beginning to fight him himself, he realized he underestimated just how fast and how powerful Watchdog Man was. Though he does still continue that fight, we then move back to the martial arts tournament, where again Suryu keeps getting up every time he falls down, which is worth points, but ultimately he ends up completely defeated and demoralized. Gokutetsu gets called back to the association, leaving behind the only successful um, what is his name? Well, one of the other fighters, and I don't remember his name. There's been so many. All right, so I believe it was Bakuzen. I could be wrong. But he's been watching Suryu and the heroes fight off these lesser monsters that Gokutetsu has created. But upon seeing Gokutetsu be so overpowering, he decides that he wants to become a monster, so he eats multiple of the remaining monster cells, and this knocks him out for a while, and at first Gokutetsu thinks that it did not work, and continues to beat up on Suryu. However, then it does work, and he ends up becoming a much more successful monster than the other guys did. Perhaps because he ate so many, or perhaps that was his natural inclination. It is revealed that monster cells can have varying effects depending on the raw material they're working with. So anyways, he becomes very powerful, and Gokutetsu gets called back to the association. He tells Bakuzen to come with him. Bakuzen says no, he doesn't want to. He wants to just cause chaos, and Gokutetsu warns him that once the Monster Association pulls out, any remaining monsters are going to be fodder for the S classes, but he decides he wants to stay anyways, and he then decides he's going to finish off an already weakened Suryu because he had some sort of hate on Suryu as a martial artist, and so he starts to attack Suryu, who cries out. He calls for help from any heroes anywhere, feeling the despair of being too outmatched. And that is when Saitama arrives saying that he heard him and starts walking towards Bakuzen. And that's our cliffhanger for the episode. So now that we have been reminded about what happened, we will now rank the episode. As always, we're ranking on our mostly objective ranking, which uses set values to determine the score, and then the personal ranking, which is a score that I decide on based on entertainment value. So our mostly objective rank values are as follows. I highlighted those I felt applied. So we have our single episode supporting character introductions, and even though there's only 2 this time, I'm following the same process I have been for this season, which is that we group like with like. And so monster-wise, we have the Three Crows and Joffrey, and they're worth 1 point. Then we have our multi-episode supporting character growth. We have Suryu revealing more finishing moves, Dark Body Quake Tiger Fist, Dark Body Phoenix Rising Fist, and Dark Body Flying Dragon Fist. Though, to be fair, I think that might have been a mistranslation because he was totally kicking on that last move, and I don't know why it would be called fist if you're using your feet, but that's just an observation. And then, of course, at the start, obviously in the previous episode, Suryo, during his fight with Saitama, disparaged heroes and the need for heroes, called them fakes, called them glory mongers, called them people in it for fame and money, faking virtue and justice. And yet by the end of this episode, he's come to realize that heroes are important. For example, Snek and Max, despite the fact that they are going to lose, came back anyways because they're heroes, whereas Siryu attempted to run but didn't get very far because that was, of course, when Bakuzen woke up. And by the end, he's calling out for help for a hero to come and save him, obviously having come to understand the role that heroes play and their importance. And so I feel like that is definitely character growth worth the 2 points, bringing us to 3 points. However, unfortunately, there weren't any other positives. And the negative was obviously negative messaging or behavior, which were a bunch of people willingly taking monster cells to give up their humanity for the sake of power, which of course is very rotten and shows poor character, especially these people who are supposed to be like, well, I guess martial arts ultimately is about, well, depends on who you ask. Obviously, in anime and probably historically, it was about violence. You know, you were soldiers, you were warriors, you were going out to fight. In modern day, though, if you take like a karate class or a self-defense class or any sort of martial arts class, they usually say it's about self-defense and, you know, finding your center and so on and so forth. But I mean, this is fiction, so probably more about the violence. So, I mean, I guess they're the type who may be predisposed, but still to willingly choose to give up your humanity, especially knowing that monsters attack other people, that means that you'd be willing to attack other people, not just other martial artists who are trained in a fair fight, but the innocent and the weaker. And that, of course, never a good thing. So I took 2 points for that, which unfortunately leaves this episode as a 1 out of 10 objectively. And that then brings our season rankings so far in our mostly objective ranking to in first, the human monster. The hunt begins, the metal bat. Return of the hero, the martial arts tournament, the S-class heroes, the monster uprising, and then this episode in 8th, the resistance of the strong. Now, personally, I felt better about this episode than it was objectively. Obviously, as I said, people willingly eating monster shells and turning into grotesque, ugly things called monsters, not great. But ultimately, did add for entertainment value. Some of them, when they turned into monsters, got some sort of upgrade. One got like a beam through his horns, another kind of got like lightning powers. Some just kind of went Hyde, you know, from Jekyll and Hyde. Or which one's actually the evil one? Was it Jekyll or was it Hyde? Huh. I've never actually watched it. I just know it from, you know, when it's used in other TV shows, like the Chipmunks specifically. Anywho, Point is, they turned monstrously ugly and got maybe a little bit of a physical boost, but nothing that a human martial artist couldn't handle, as Tsuryu showed. It was really only Bakuzen who was truly successful as he reached a higher threat level. Gokutetsu points out that he may even have reached dragon level, which is what Gokutetsu was. However, the main thing about this episode was that it was one long fight. Tsuryu against these martial artists that became monsters, while some of the weaker martial artists watched from the sidelines before they got knocked out by the three crows. And so it was very entertaining, entertainment value wise, because the fight was visually interesting and held attention and was exciting. But as always, we got to take points because our main character didn't show up till the end, and it's very frustrating that our main character is barely in it. Then, of course, there was that little brief aside to Garo and Watchdog Man, which was interesting, but it was so brief that it's like, did it have to be in this episode? Or maybe it could have waited until you could give it more focus in an episode. So there were flaws, but ultimately it was a big fight scene, and it was a very fun fight scene, and Surya was impressive. The heroes coming back was meaningful, and Saitama showing up at the last second was a great cliffhanger to end on. So ultimately, I gave it a 7 out of 10. There's not much more to commentate on because it was just a fight scene, but it was an entertaining one, hence the higher score. So that brings our season ranking so far on the personal ranking to the S-Class heroes in first, The Hunt Begins, The Human Monster, Return of the Hero. This episode came in fifth, The Resistance of the Strong, The Monster Uprising, The Martial Arts Tournament, and so far and last was The Metal Bat. And now we come to our final segment, our series ranking so far. And on our mostly objective ranking, we had season 1 ending with 88.33%. And season 2 so far has 63 out of 120. And on our personal ranking, it ended with 76.67%. And season 2 so far has 55 out of 120. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Punch Man Season 2, Episode 20, The Resistance of the Strong. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.